So what should you take from this? If you seek a tidy moral, I cannot give you one wrapped in neat paper. Instead, remember this. There is a path to justice that feeds the community, and a path to vengeance that feeds only you until it eats you. When the ledger lies open and you hold the proof, ask yourself what you want to build after the taking is done. If you insist on a final lesson from an old man with weary hands, fight. Yes, win, but know why you fight. Keep your heart intact as you right the wrongs. Because what use is toppling a tyrant if you become another tower of the same stone? If this story got to you, if it burned and warmed in equal measure, do one thing for me, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if someone built their life from your ruin? And if you've ever seen revenge done well, or badly, share it. We learn from each other's fires. Until next time, keep your ledger clean and your conscience clearer. He sneered, tried to turn the blame outward. You wanted my life? You wanted everything I have? His voice shook. For a moment I thought pity might rise, but pity for him felt like treason to those who had suffered. Besides, pity had no place in the work I had done. When the legal papers finally settled and the men who had been victimized received small settlements, the village exhaled. People who had lived in low hum of anxiety for years felt the air in their lungs change. Little shops reopened. A teacher who had not been paid for months received her wages. The man's house was put under lien. He had to sell discreetly and hastily to cover obligations. The people who once bowed to him now looked him in the face and saw a man, not a king. What did I feel when it was over? Do you think I danced on his doorstep and laughed until dawn? No, revenge is not a fireworks display. The payoff came with odd silence. I felt relief at the truth being known. I felt a hollow sort of triumph, but I also felt in the quiet after a fatigue that settled in my bones deeper than it had before, because the ledger had not just mapped his crimes, it had mapped the way I had used grief. To turn pain into action is a kind of grace. To let pain rot into obsession is a different fate. I had crossed that thin line a time or two. I had felt the softness of my humanity rub away as the hard edges of a plan took form. In the end, justice had been served, but it had left its mark on me. He lost almost everything. He left the village soon after, a pale shadow carrying a suitcase. People murmured, some spat, others walked on. I walked past his empty house once and felt nothing for a long time, then a small, complicated thing, liberation maybe, or maybe only the recognition that a wound had closed and left a scar. Some nights since, I have found myself smiling at a market stall without calculating whether the man near me will profit. The weight on my chest has lifted a little, but the memory of those 2 years remains, like a landscape I can visit and not live in. I learned that revenge can right a wrong, but it rarely, if ever, mends you. It changes the weather inside you. It teaches you the cost of balance. When he realized the net was closing, he did the desperate thing. He accused me, in a voice loud and oily with outrage, at a public grant meeting. He stood up and spat my name like a curse, called me a liar and a thief, the kind of language that in other times might have ended me. There were gasps. Some people stared. Some looked at their feet. He expected the villagers to rally to him. He expected loyalty born of fear. Instead, he found the opposite, eyes that had seen too much. The woman at the market spoke up. The shopkeeper produced the photocopy I'd given him. The accounts clerk, a young man who had liked me once for reasons immaterial now, stood and said, "We have records." The room hummed like a hive. The sound of his anger that day was animal. He stumbled through denials until the thin paper of proof wedged under his lies. I sat in the back feeling my palms sweat. I did not gloat out loud. I did not clap. I had learned that triumph sung too loudly invites the world to judge you. He was hauled in for questioning, not by mobs, but by men with clipboards and proper authority. It was less cinematic than I had imagined. There were no dramatic confrontations, no fistfights in alleys. The machinery of consequence can be cold and efficient. It does not require flair. It only requires patience and truth placed in the right hands. And when his world began to crumble, the sound was subtle at first. A canceled dinner party, a quiet text from a friend that read, "We should talk." Then louder, subpoenas, liens on property, suppliers halting deliveries. He watched his house of gleaming glass and polished stone become less shining. He watched merchants demand payment in full. He saw men he had called friends cross the street to avoid him. There was a moment, and I will never forget it, when he went to the window of his study and peered down at the square. The key was not to shout the truth from rooftops. The key was to follow the ledger to the places where his house of cards would wobble. I arranged for letters to be delivered, quietly and legally, to men who had loaned him money. I made sure suppliers received firm notices. I leaked it carefully, constructed rumor to one trader that suggested investigations were coming. Little things, paper in the right hands. Men began to ask for receipts. Men began to talk. The people he'd bribed and bullied had learned to speak in silence. I gave them sentences, and then I hit him where he prized himself most, reputation. He was invited to sit on committees, to cut ribbons, to stand in photographs. His golden windows depended on other people believing in his golden heart, so I fed the doubt. A respectful letter to the local council with copies of ledger entries. A tax inspector politely asking questions where he had thought there would be none. An accountant, professional, careful, who examined books as if they were sacred texts and found holes like graves. I will not lie. There were nights I trembled. There were days I wondered if I had become the very thing I swore against, a destroyer. But every time the temptation to stop rose, I pictured his laugh. I pictured the face of the woman who had come to me that night with that battered notebook. I promised myself I would not let him sit untouched on a throne made from others' bones. There came a morning when everything changed. The tax inspector called him in for a routine follow-up. The photograph of him cutting the charity ribbon appeared in the paper with a small, polite correction. Subject under review. Suppliers sent terse letters. Friends who had smiled at his table began to say, "I'm sorry I can't," when asked to host his parties. He noticed. Men like him always notice once the margins tighten. I watched him pace his marble halls. The same man who used to stride the market now twitching, like a man with a splinter in every foot. His face when he read the first official notice, and that cold, practiced face broke for a second. A human moment. He sniffed and then laughed a laugh that had no joy in it, because he believed he could buy the problem away. I'll tell you how I did it. But first know this. The plan was never about sudden fireworks or theatrical ruin. It was a slow, patient thing, a tightening rope rather than a single blade. I wanted him to feel the same hollow I had felt. The cold breakfast without laughter, the way neighbors averted their eyes, the quiet on market day when no one wanted to be seen with a man who had betrayed them. I wanted the world he'd built on my ruin to creak and settle, to reveal the rotten beams beneath the polish. I started small. Small things are the softest way into a man's life. A whisper here, a missed payment there, a rumor that tastes like truth. I watched him the way a man watches weather, what direction the wind favored, how the crowd shifted when he entered. He relied on two things more than any other: appearances and people who feared to cross him. Strip the appearances and the people scatter. It began with the ledger. He kept his books like a secret lover, tucked away in a drawer, neat columns, tidy lies. I learned this from a woman who'd once worked in his home. She had a conscience that wouldn't let her sleep after she saw what he had done to people who trusted him. She came to me one rain-soaked night with eyes like whetstones and said, "I can't be part of it anymore." She handed me a battered notebook and left before dawn. I looked at the numbers and felt something I hadn't felt in years. A plan forming. Brittle, and I learned his habits. The way he strutted through the square each market day. The merchants he cheated with a smile. The way he drank too much when he thought no one was watching. His vices, his allies, his secrets, I gathered them like kindling. But gathering kindling is not the same as striking the match. And let me tell you, those nights were louder than any battle. Silence can roar in your ears when all you hear is your own heartbeat pounding. With plans you're not yet brave enough to act on. I do not ask for pity. I only tell you this so you understand. Hatred seeps into your bones. It becomes your closest companion. I felt my heart soften one moment, then harden to stone the next. I've measured the line between justice and vengeance, and some nights I swear that line does not exist. The old scriptures say an eye for an eye, balance for balance. And when I heard those words whispered in memory, something ancient stirred in me, dangerous, comforting, a promise of balance restored. But another voice, older still, whispered, "What will you lose in the taking?" So here I stand before you now, an old man with fire still smoldering in his chest, telling you of a time when I was young, broken, and bent on making another man feel the shattering he had given me. If I sound angry, it's because I was angry then. If I sound weary, it's because flames that bright burn everything they touch, even the man who lit them. Listen well, lad. Hatred can be a teacher, but a cruel one. It will show you how to act, yes, but it will also show you how to ruin yourself while you ruin another. For 2 years, revenge owned me. It carved my nights hollow, it shaped my days. It whispered in my ear until I thought I'd go mad. But then it came the turning point, the moment where thought hardened into action. That, my boy, is where the true story begins. I remember nights like this as if they were carved into the bones of my youth. Nights where silence felt heavier than stone and my heart heavier still. Sit down, lad. Let an old man tell you about a darkness that once lived inside him. There was a time, not so long ago, though the years have stretched me thin, when I woke each morning with a weight on my chest that never lifted. Some men wake with joy for the day. Others wake with worry about bread or work. But me, I woke with grief that turned to bitterness, and bitterness that curdled into something far darker. And at the center of it all was him. You've met such men, I'm sure. The type who smile with perfect teeth while hiding poison on their tongue. The kind of man who climbs by tearing down others. He was that and more. He took from me something I could never claw back with my bare hands. I won't spill the exact details, not because I've forgotten, no. Wounds like that never fade, but because names and facts are sharp as knives, and I've bled enough for one lifetime. What matters is this: while I drowned, he thrived. While I rebuilt ruins with my bare hands, he sat on a throne fashioned from the rubble he left behind. I'd pass him in the village square sometimes. He'd nod as if I were less than the dirt under his boots, always well-dressed. Always laughing with men who never knew what filth he was made of. His house gleamed on the hill, polished stone, golden windows catching the sun, while I dragged myself through mud and sweat just to keep breathing. At first, the pain was dull, a slow ache that gnawed at the edges of me, but ache becomes fever if you feed it long enough. And oh lad, I fed it well. Do you know what it is to lie awake, your fists clenched, imagining the sound of another man's downfall? To taste iron in your mouth, not from blood, but from the sheer hunger for justice? Most men dream of bread. I dreamt of undoing. Most men pray for tomorrow. I prayed for ruin, his ruin. 2 years. 2 long, bitter years I lived that way. Every sunrise mocked me. Every sunset whispered, he still prospers. He still walks free. And with each passing day, the thought sharpened. He must not get away with it. Tone shifts deeper, slower, almost growling with intensity. Sometimes I frightened myself. I'd catch my reflection in the window, eyes hollow, teeth grinding in my sleep. I'd whisper questions into the dark. Is it worth it? Will it heal you or will it consume you? But hatred, boy, hatred is cunning. It takes those doubts, chews them up, and spits them back as resolve. I told myself I'll see it through. Not for peace, and God knows revenge gives no peace, but because the idea of him untouched was unbearable. There's danger in this kind of fire. Once you set it loose, there's no calling it back. One shot, that's all you get. If he even smells the wind change, he'll strike first. And men like him, they fight dirty. So I waited. And I watched. Imagine lying awake at night, not thinking of tomorrow's work, but of revenge. Not dreaming of bread, but of retribution. That was me. And today, lad, I'll tell you how hatred became my only companion, and how it led me to one of the most dangerous, most satisfying choices of my life. If you've ever been wronged so deeply that you wanted nothing but justice or maybe even vengeance, then stick with me. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's step together into the fire of one of the darkest, most unforgettable chapters of my youth.